In this week's In-Ear Insights, let's talk about whether ego is needed to succeed. For some context, at the recent Aurora Pulse Agency Summit, during one of the sessions, one of the attendees said they were wondering how important this was. The person in question was a female agency CEO, and she was comparing herself to her male counterparts and all of their, in her words, bluffing and bluster. She was wondering whether you needed that big ego to succeed, because from her point of view, her counterparts and their agencies were more successful, and in successful meaning revenue and clients, bigger name clients, bigger retainers, etc. So, Katie, what do you think about this? How would you answer this person's question?
Gosh, that is it's a tough, it should be an easy question. So the easy answer should be no, it's all bullshit, and you can see through the disingenuousness of these people. But the real answer is, there are certain people, with a tendency to be, white men of a certain age who are more pompous, more aggressive, more overconfident, which comes across as that big ego, which then translate into success because they attract similar like-minded humans who happen to be in those decision-making positions. Now, here's the thing. Those positions will eventually be turned over, whether it's this year, 10 years from now. I do strongly believe that we will see a shift in the type of diversity we see in those power positions, in those decision-making positions. So while there will always be a certain level of overconfident, filling the room with air, not really saying anything, individuals who are seemingly successful, they will be, displaced. They will be put out of power. So I guess the complicated answer of do you need ego to be successful is it depends on who your audience is. It depends on who it is that you're trying to get a decision from. Chris, you and I present ourselves very differently. We're just different people in general. And so even this morning, we were talking about something, and the way in which you said, something to me, just put it in the calendar. I know you well enough to know that you were making a suggestion, but someone who doesn't know you would have seen that as aggressive and forceful. So I made a joke back, like, yes, sir, right away, knowing, acknowledging, yep, it can definitely be done. And so it's such a complicated question. Chris, what is your thought on it? Because I could rant and rave about men versus women in power positions, but you being a man are going to obviously have a different perspective than me.
I think, and this is something we've talked about in the past, I don't think ego is the correct word. Mm-hmm. There's two personality traits, one of which is confidence. And I do believe you need confidence, self-confidence to be successful. I believe that wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. Arrogance is when you have confidence that is unfounded. That there's no justification for having that level of confidence. But when it comes to ego, one of the things I heard that I thought was so insightful, I was listening to a former Top Gun instructor being interviewed actually about one of the new movies, but he was saying when ego is one of the most dangerous things in a fighter pilot, because he said it's not that they get brash or they do stupid things, it's because ego forces you to stop listening. And the moment you stop listening, you are no longer teachable, and that makes you dangerous because you stop learning. And so to answer this question, ego is dangerous to success, because if you come into that with that perspective of, I know this thing, you've turned off listening, you've turned off learning, and you're going to get ambushed, right? Mm-hmm. Part of what you were saying about those positions turning over is the natural habit of, if you have that ego that shuts you off from learning, mm-hmm. you're going to get blindsided, and you and your organization are going to take a hit because you didn't see Snapchat coming or TikTok coming or NFTs coming. You didn't see it because you were refusing to listen. You're like, I know what's right. And you didn't. So to me, ego is very, very dangerous. This morning in analytics for marketers, I was poking fun at myself. I'm like, hey, look, here's a wild success with network graphing. It was not. It was a miserable failure. But in the hopes that perhaps someone else will look at that and comment and go, oh, well, here's what you're doing wrong. So the opposite is being willing to say, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing with this thing. Can anyone help me? I want to listen. I want to learn. I want to grow and become more capable. So I would be very, very wary of any CEO whose ego is so strong that they couldn't learn anymore.
Well, and I think you hit upon the two major components that we really should be talking about, which is that self-confidence and the arrogance. But really the third one being that self-awareness. And I feel like those are the three traits that we really want to be focusing on. And so with that arrogance, I mean, I've been in my fair share of meetings and, pitches with someone, regardless of gender, who will walk in and assume that they've already closed the sale, that they've already won the conversation, the argument, that they've already won over the audience without even considering, hey, I might have a question for you, or I might have a concern about the thing that you're telling me. And there's this, basically, it's the wrong way of thinking. There's this misconception that you need to walk into a room and own it and know everything. And I feel like those days are really starting to be something of the past, because marketers now, people who make decisions now, humans now are looking for someone who's more empathetic, someone who's more open, as you say, Chris, to learning, to being questioned, versus that dictator who's just going to say, I know everything. You don't have to question it. Don't worry. You can trust me blindly. And, that still works in some situations, but it's becoming less and less of a strategy that's going to be effective. And so that arrogance, that overconfidence, you're right, absolutely right. It is dangerous because you can see it may not be an immediate consequence, but it's not sustainable. And when it starts to break down and people start to see through all of this bravado and essentially these, falsehoods that you've told, all of your credibility is out the window.
All your credibility is out the window too, but also in a sales sense. Mm-hmm. If you're not listening, you're not making money.
Right.
I have lost track of the number of clients that we have won because we went into the sales input call with a, so what do you need help with? Not a, hey, you can buy this, and this is for sale, and here's the list of what we've got for sale. Mm-hmm. And finding out 2 minutes into the conversation that what the client thought they needed was in fact not what they needed. What they needed was something much bigger, much more valuable to them, much more, something they'd be more willing to invest in, and so therefore more valuable to us. But coming in with that sense of, I would call it like quiet confidence. Whatever they say, there's a good chance that we can help them with it or point them to a partner that can. Mm-hmm. But they got to say it first. So you got to pull back on your ego, turn it down so that you can listen and you can say, oh, well, here's what's happening. I wouldn't even call it necessarily empathy. I mean, it is technically empathy, but it's just common sense. Listen first to see what the person has to say, because they may have more things and more valuable things. And if you can use good listening to build trust quickly, you will get better results, which means that your ego has to be pulled out of the equation or you can't listen.
I think, Chris, you and I could each speak to instances in our lives and our careers where our egos weren't necessarily in check. I mean, it's something that you and I were talking about when we were discussing this topic a couple weeks ago, that, you in previous roles, were starting to drift down that line of having an unchecked ego because you didn't have anyone around you to keep you grounded. I can say for me, it was an age and maturity thing. in my, mid-20s, my ego remained unchecked because I was doing a lot of really great work and nobody was saying, but here's where you're going wrong. So when somebody did, I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm untouchable. And it became a problem. And so I feel like one of those ways to keep your ego in check is to have someone who keeps you more grounded, whether that's personally or professionally. But you still have to be open to hearing that feedback. And, so you and I could have had a very different type of professional future together where I could have been saying, hey, Chris, what about this? What about this? I don't know if this works here. And you could have continued to say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not on my level. And we would have had a very different professional relationship.
That's absolutely true. Again, that goes back to that listening. If your ego is, if you're in a situation where no one is listening, that can happen, which is what has happened to me for most of my career. I was doing work that no one else understood and therefore didn't really question. And looking back on it, some of the stuff I did was just, flat out mathematically incorrect. Like looking back now going, oh, shouldn't have done that. I was reading through some old emails the other night while I was doing some cleanup on my computer, some emails back from 2010, 2011, where I was discussing Google Analytics data with one of my direct reports. And I was reading my responses going, ooh, no, that was the wrong thing to say. It was just mathematically incorrect. And that all that comes back to that third point you mentioned, which is having that self-awareness of, do I know where I am? Right? Do I know how far down one path or the other? Because the other side of that confidence is a lack of confidence, where you just can't make decisions. Like you're paralyzed. You have nothing that motivates you to say, I have succeeded in the past. I do have these skills, and therefore at some point I can make a decision. And so it's almost like a spectrum. Like on one hand, you have the overconfident, arrogant, you're doing things and you're just going to crash and burn. On the other hand, you're paralyzed and you can't move and you get nothing done. And you've got to find that middle ground.
Yeah, I think it's, I can definitely say I've been on, both sides of that extreme, where then I needed the constant validation of other people. Like, am I doing this right? Do I know what I'm doing? Can you please, please, please give me some assurance? Which then that lack of confidence in yourself means that other people have a lack of confidence in your abilities. And then you're not seen so much as a leader anymore. You're seen as someone who just can't get things done. And so it is, you can swing from one side of the pendulum to the other. And so I personally feel like, yes, you need ego, a healthy dose of ego, but you need other people around you to keep you grounded and keep you based in reality, is really what it comes down to. And I think that that's one of the worst kept secrets in management and leadership, is that nobody's doing it alone. Nobody's like the solo hero who's only ever come up with their own ideas and figured everything out on their own and solely made those decisions with nobody else factoring in. I mean, even if you look at this is, and I apologize in advance if I get any of this, superhero universe wrong. But if you look even at, superheroes like Batman, he had his butler. He had people around him, Alfred. He had the super smart guy at the tech company building the things for him. Like, he wasn't alone in his, destiny of being a superhero. He had people around him to keep him grounded, to say, hey, dumbass, stop being such a jerk and go help people. This isn't about you. It's bigger than you. I feel the same way is true of leaders in any kind of leadership position. Anyone who tells you that they're doing it solely by themselves is not self-aware to see that there is a community of people around them trying to keep them grounded.
And not only that, but they have to have some sense or feeling of accountability for it. right? Because you can have people telling you're off track, but if you're not accountable to them,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. We've seen that with any number of CEOs, particularly like tech CEOs, where, because they're the majority shareholder in the company too. Yeah, the board can say whatever it wants, Mark Zuckerberg, but at the end of the day, they can't do anything. They're powerless to actually do anything different. Look at the way Elon Musk runs Tesla, and some of the stuff that's happening around him. Look at what happened with Dan Price at Gravity Payments and things. There's all these instances where not only do you need that group of people to help steer you, but you have to be accountable to them. You have to be, and part of that may be a role structure where, yes, you are accountable to a board of directors. And part of it is also a relationship structure where you trust these people enough to not lead you astray. It's akin to, this is one of the things that we say in the martial arts. A leader is someone who is in front, with a machete hacking the trail so that the people behind them can follow and not have to do the same thing. But you need somebody there to say, hey, we're headed towards a cliff, let's change directions. But also, you need those people, you need to feel that sense of responsibility for those people. So you can't just sit down in the middle of the jungle and say, I'm tired, I'm not doing this anymore. No, the leader still needs to pick up the machete and keep going.
It does strike me. So in instances like a Zuckerberg or a Musk or a Price, maybe the board can't hold them accountable because of the amount of shares that they own, but the people who are holding them accountable are the audience. They're the customers. They're the people who are choosing whether or not to give them their hard-earned cash. And so there's a lot of people who have left the Facebook platform, or advertisers who are refusing to do business with Facebook anymore or any of their other assets because of the decisions and the behaviors that someone like Mark Zuckerberg has exhibited. Elon Musk has definitely alienated a lot of his audience with his past behavior. And so while it may not be immediate accountability, there are consequences that will eventually catch up to you. I mean, that's sort of what we were saying at the beginning of this, is maybe right now, not today, but eventually those things are going to come back to bite you, whether you realize it or not, because humans, audience, prospects, customers, they're looking for a certain amount of credibility, of trustworthiness, of something that they can rely on and believe in. And if it's not there, you're alienating your audience. And so if it's not your board, then it's your customers.
So how does somebody then go about figuring out, what if you are this agency CEO? What do you tell her? What are her next steps?
I think that for the woman asking the question, my first question for her is, what does success look like for her individually? So the first thing that struck me was, she's measuring success based on what other people are doing. Why is it that those are what she's being compared to? Maybe those are her direct competitors. And so that's the first thing I personally would want to figure out is, why is your personal success measured against what they're doing over there? Is that the way that you feel comfortable operating? And if the answer is no, then forget about what those jackasses are doing and focus specifically on your team, your company, your growth, your success. How can you be markedly different from the people that you don't respect? I think that, it's hard. This is an understatement. It's hard being a woman in tech. Like, that's an understatement. And a lot of times what women do, myself included, is we try to overcompensate by feeling like we need to be just like our male counterparts. We need to be more aggressive. We need to be louder. We need to be, bigger. And what we see is that actually has negative repercussions because of this cultural, bias against women, saying that women who are loud and aggressive are troublesome and they're problematic. And so it isn't given the same type of respect. And so my first piece of advice for this woman is, don't do what they're doing. It's not going to work for you. And that's not to say you can't be loud and aggressive, but find a way that's authentic for you. And so Chris, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I'm appropriately aggressive. I'm direct, but I don't feel like I'm like loud and in your face. And so for me, have found a way to be that, heavy hand when needed.
I would agree. And I think the objectives that your standard agency CEO has, I mean, they are pretty similar, right? We want to keep making money. We want to keep
Right.
winning newer, bigger, better clients who have name recognition, because like attracts like, and success begets more success. So in those aspects, I think there's a lot of common ground. Where I think your point is really good is there's more than one way up the mountain, right? And it's the same as, like, I am not going to achieve success in basketball, right? I just don't have the stature, I don't have the height and stuff like that. So if I thought that, if I was under the perception that basketball was the only way to achieve success in life, I would have handicapped myself. If on the other hand, I say, well, this is where success is. It's, having multi-million-dollar income. How do I get there? Basketball is not it. I probably should not try to follow in the footsteps of Michael Jordan for any number of reasons. It would just be a bad choice. But could I follow in a different set of footsteps to get to that objective, but doing it in a way that's more fitted for the skills that I have? So for someone like that, like, yeah, if you want to have a $10 million recurring revenue per year, that's a sensible objective. Now, what is the recipe that you're going to use that's unique to you that will get you there? Because the sooner you can get to your own recipe, the harder it will be for competitors to do that, because they're not you. Just like you're not Michael Jordan, your competitors can't be you. They can't bring those unique ingredients of success to the table that you can. So if you can find out that's going to be for you, and that's your blueprint, then anyone trying to copy that's going to have a really hard time.
Well, and it also occurs to me, and Chris, you and I have seen this firsthand, is just because someone is winning new business doesn't necessarily mean they're keeping it. So what may appear to be success from the outside, internally may be a lot of big turnover. So, I mean, we've been in situations where clients have signed on for something and then gotten something very different. And then the agency was, released from their contract pretty quickly because, nobody felt comfortable with the arrangement anymore. And so, yes, from the outside, the press release goes out of, so-and-so agency just won this big piece of business, but you don't see the announcement when that business is lost. You don't see the announcement if they can't retain it past that 1-year contract because they didn't do anything. And so I think that also needs to come into question when you're defining success.
It does. And I mean, that's true in general. When you look at, for example, the way we operate Trust Insights, it's not to work ourselves to death 90 hours a week, right? That's not the goal.
No, thank
could we? Yes. Should we, or do we want to? Not necessarily. So for us, success is also a trade-off of saying, yes, we want to earn money, but we also want to, like, see the house that we pay for, right? We want to see our family members. We want to not be on the road 40 of the 52 weeks of the year, kind of thing. Now, again, for this CEO, those are questions that are going to be unique to every individual. What does that look like? What are the kinds of things that you want to do? Because, I mean, even just something down as simple as sales tactics are going to vary wildly based on what you have confidence in for yourself, right? When we were at the old shop, every sales pitch was identical. It was a 90-minute dog and pony show, 170 slides. Here's a picture of our building. Here's, all this stuff. Here's slide after slide of logo after logo. And our win rate was, not great. As an agency, it was like 20-ish something percent. When we pitched our own clients, and now, obviously doing that with Trust Insights, if we get a chance at bat, we win on 60% of the time because we found what works for us. So you have that multi-million-dollar goal. Now, what's the path up the mountain that's going to work for you? Because regardless of gender, regardless of ego, you're going to have things that just work better for you. For some people, it's going to be a video sales pitch, right? Being able to say, like, here's a video we put together. For some people, it's a written proposal. For some people, it's a dog and pony show. There's some people who really love and are good at doing the dog and pony show, but it has to fit with the product and it has to fit with the people. It's kind of like that people process platform thing.
Who knew, Chris? Who knew? I mean, if people want to see pictures of my house in our sales deck, I mean, I can provide it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's under construction, but I mean, if they want,
they'd rather see your dog.
I mean, I can do that. I can put a picture of my dog in the sales pitch because she was recently on video with me, so she'll probably be there anyway. But no, I mean, that's exactly it. Like, if you're trying to replicate exactly what your competitors are doing, then you're already doing it wrong, because you are not your competitors. Maybe you're going after similar clients, but there's a reason why they're not winning or retaining every single potential client out there. And so for us, a lot of what we do is that relationship building and actually getting to know our clients on a deeper level and really understand what their pain points are, to the point where, ideally getting clients to sign on for multiple years isn't a big deal. We have been in business for 5 years and we have one client who's been with us for 4 of those. We're right now in the process of talking with our existing clients about next year's contracts, and they're not difficult conversations. Really, honestly, what it comes down to is, do they have the budget or not? Not, do they see the value in the work that we do, and have we given them, everything we possibly can plus respect? That's never the conversation. It's, we need to see what's in our budget and can we justify it? And 10 times out of 10, even if the budget's out of their control, they're fighting for us to stay in their budget because of the relationship that we've built with them. And so that, to me, even if we don't get the repeat business, is a measure of success, because it says we've done our job. And if and when that budget opens up, we're the first phone call they make.
Exactly. So I would say, to start wrapping up, no, in fact, ego is dangerous to success. The more ego you have, the less you listen. The less you listen, the worse you do at business. So when you look at trying to succeed, the more you listen, the better you're going to be.
I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, ego is dangerous. Arrogance is dangerous. Lack of self-awareness is dangerous. Too much confidence is dangerous. And so if you find yourself in that situation, look around and see who's around you, who's been trying to keep you grounded. If you are that person who's trying to ground someone who is, that egotistical person, keep trying. Don't give up on them.
Or give up on them and update your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that road. Let's be a little optimistic, Chris.
Okay. If you've got stories that you'd like to share about your own experiences as an agency owner, or as somebody who is just trying to figure out how to get more success out of business, pop on by our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 2,600 other folks are asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, chances are we probably have it on a platform that is of your preference. Go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, where you can see all the different places you can tune in. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.